Good evening. I'm Chuck Todd here in Washington, and welcome to MTP Daily. The president may not want to see the shutdown crisis end, because guess what? The next crisis is likely going to be bigger, longer, and impossible for him to control. The breaking news, obviously, this afternoon, the president's longtime lawyer and fixer, Michael Cohen, has now agreed to testify publicly in Congress before the House Oversight Committee on February 7th. Democrats are obviously going to have to tread cautiously with this one, because while Cohen has implicated the president in a pair of campaign felonies and admitted to lying to Congress about the president's business ties to Russia, those are matters Bob Mueller may not want him to be talking publicly about yet. We're going to talk to a top Democrat on the Oversight Committee in just a few minutes to find out the scope. What can they talk to him about, and what can't they talk to him about? But speaking of Mueller's report, Cohen's testimony is going to be a mere appetizer to the potential anvil that's about to drop on this president, as sources tell NBC News that Mueller is in the, quote, bottom of the ninth inning on his report and his investigation, and that actual report could land on the Attorney General's desk sometime in late February or early March. The bottom line, the president is entering a crisis where an emergency declaration is not really an option. But as I said, the president may want this shutdown crisis to stick around for a while, because it's serving as a nice distraction from what's coming, not to say that it's a distraction to have this government shutdown. Today, he was at the border for what he himself had apparently dismissed as a photo op. A photo op, he insists, his communications team pushed him to do. But there he is. And folks, while the Mueller report and Cohen's testimony speak to a crisis of epic proportions for this president, let's not lose sight of what is happening right now with a government shutdown that is poised to become the longest in American history in 24 hours. Joining me now from the White House, NBC Chief White House Correspondent Halle Jackson. Tonight's panel is Susan Page, USA Today Washington Bureau Chief, Jason Johnson, MSNBC contributor and politics editor at TheRoot.com, and Matthew Continetti is the editor-in-chief at the Washington Free Beacon. Halle, let me just start quickly with the news about Cohen.
Oh, yeah.
Did that rattle folks at the White House, or is this just another day in the perpetual motion machine that is the chaotic nature of the West Wing?
I think it's probably closer to the latter, although anytime you have Michael Cohen coming back out and speaking publicly, that obviously is a question mark of what might he say. Now, here's the thing. What we will hear, because remember, this is going to be a televised hearing. This is, we're told, it's going to be on camera, live, like you see those hearings before. So what we will hear from him is not going to be new to Robert Mueller, to the special counsel, to federal prosecutors, right? But some of it may be new to us, and perhaps for the White House, an indication of just how much Michael Cohen knows, when he knew it, and what he's prepared to say to not just Congress, but to the rest of us. I'll tell you, the president was asked about this today. He was down at the border. He was doing that trip. But actually, our colleague, somebody we know well, Washington Post's Philip Rucker, threw him a question and said, Mr. President, you worried about what Michael Cohen's going to say?
Halle, let me stop you. We actually have it. Why don't we listen to it rather than have you describe it? Take a listen.
Mr. President, back in Washington, there's some big news about Michael Cohen. He's agreed to testify before the House Democrats next month. What do you think of that? Are you worried about it?
And I'm not worried about it at all, no.
Yeah, a typical response there.
Correct.
Not surprising there. Very quickly, before I let you go, Lindsey Graham just tweeted, time for the president to use the emergency powers. He's not sure it's going to work. He hopes it does, but he just tweeted he's given up. Is that what the White House is working on right now? This is now just a question of when they issue when they attempt to issue this emergency order, not if.
So I don't know that I would go at this point quite that far, Chuck, but it is definitely something they're working on. I actually had a conversation just today with a White House official talking about how there is preparation happening inside the White House counsel's office to lay the groundwork for what they know will be legal challenges if the president does declare a national emergency. Now, I'll tell you, it seems like one of the very few ways out of this for President Trump. And as we are talking about this, we're learning more from our colleagues Julia Ainsley and Courtney Cubie about how he plans to do this, pulling money from the Army Corps of Engineers and potentially from these disaster recovery efforts in California and Puerto Rico, which is not going to sit well with a lot of folks.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, go for it. Finish your thought.
Well, that's it. That was the thought. So Yeah, it's not something that the president is certainly closed off to. He keeps talking about it. He keeps bringing it up. But what I find notable is that this was an opportunity where he could have done this today. He could have gone to the border, said, what I'm seeing is a crisis.
Right.
I'm declaring a national emergency. He didn't do it, but I do think that is certainly in the realm of possibility. One other quick note, Chuck, he was supposed to go to Davos. He canceled that trip. Normally, I wouldn't even bring it up, but I do think that's a sign he is preparing for this shutdown to last, another 2 weeks that trip was supposed to be in.
That's a fair point there, Halle Jackson at the White House. I know you've got some nightly to prepare for there. Thanks very much. Susan Page. So you have the president sitting here with this crisis, a shutdown, that is then going to bump into, in fact, one of the bills may not, it was one of those things where they'd have to vote again on the Homeland Security bill on February 8th. The day before would be the Cohen hearing, and then the Mueller report hits. Why do I think in 6 months he's going to miss this crisis?
You know how these things are all tied together? All of these, and that is Democrats take over the House. And that's part of the failure to get a deal to reopen the government. Of course, there's a longstanding failure to get money for the wall, even when Republicans controlled everything. It's part of the reason Cohen is going to come and testify in public before TV cameras about some of the most perilous accusations that have been made against President Trump. So this is the new world in which the Trump White House lives, and I think it is one that they did not understand until it started. I don't think they understood when Democrats won the midterms, took the House back, how much difference that was going to make on every front.
I don't get that, but it shows you all the naivety in the White Wing.
It's a new world in some respects, but of course it's also the same world of crisis and unpredictability. And sure, we have Michael Cohen coming to testify before the House, but last year we had Comey's testimony. That was a big deal as well. The shutdown, of course, began when the Republicans still controlled the Congress, and
I'm old enough to remember that.
Continue to control the Senate. So, yeah, you're right. There's some change, but overall, this is just the continuity of a very tumultuous Trump presidency.
Lack of message management has always been a problem for this administration. You would think the guy who's supposed to be so media savvy would know how to set up these messages better. Everyone saw this coming. Everyone could have anticipated that you're not only going to have a shutdown, but the moment that the Democrats took over, we knew that we knew that Mueller's final report was going to be coming faster rather than slower if you had Democrats take over the House. So this is a White House that's constantly been caught flat-footed, and unfortunately, you now have a president who's backed himself into a corner. He can't talk himself out of this one. There's no constituency that he's speaking to that he can expand upon, even after his speech on Tuesday, to justify what he's doing right now.
Let me go quickly to Capitol Hill. Garrett, I'm very curious. You've been talking to a bunch of senators today. They've stuck by him for now. In some ways, I think they're praying he does this emergency thing, even though they're not sure it's legal, they're not sure it works, but they just want to desperately reopen the government. Does the Michael Cohen news sort of create more urgency to end this crisis on Capitol Hill?
I think it might. I tweeted that it's a high fastball in at Trump. I mean, I think it shakes things up here a little bit and shows that while this shutdown has been the dominant story in Washington news, especially over the last couple of weeks, it won't always be that way. And, you know, it won't stop the work of these investigative committees, particularly on the House side, from plowing ahead. There's no splashier witness you could bring in, nobody personally closer to Donald Trump than Michael Cohen. And to have him up here talking to lawmakers live on television all across the country, if the shutdown is still going on at that point, unsettles the game if it doesn't change it. But to your point about the national emergency, that's definitely the takeaway that I've gotten today. So many lawmakers have said, I don't know if he should do it. I don't know if it's the best course of action. I don't even know if it's legal, but it's looking like that's the last remaining option. There was a compromise plan that Lindsey Graham was trying to float over the last couple days that seemed to die a very inglorious death today. And with that out of the way, it's just tough to see how anything else moves the ball.
Here's the thing. Even if he calls the federal emergency, the amount of time it's going to be caught up legally with people fighting over it right and left from this court to that court, and it ignores the fact that even the construction itself still has to be implemented. Yeah. And yet the lawsuits you're going to have for all the people on the border. Like, I don't think this president or anyone in his administration realizes that you've basically just opened up for 2.5 years of law and order rather than actually being able to build this.
Actually, though, let me play devil's advocate. Maybe that's exactly what they want. Don't they want the issue? Don't they want to be able to say, look at what I'm trying. The courts are fighting me. That's why I'm the only guy here. I mean, can't you picture him doing that?
He can do that. Problem is, how does that expand your base when you go into 2020? How does that help you when the economy starts to sink?
Are you trying to use a logic here?
I'm trying to think.
When has he ever tried to expand his base?
when you are trying to run for president and you've got the weak fundamentals that he's got right now, you've got Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, who just went blue, you got to think more strategically.
That's the problem, though, with this White House, Matthew, is that they don't think strategically.
The president's playing base mobilization politics. I think he's also making the bet that the Democrats are going to play base mobilization politics in 2020 as well.
They might.
And so in a way, I think he sees this as a political advantage for him. I do think that people are leaping to the conclusion that this emergency declaration is imminent, because I think that the president believes that the longer the shutdown lasts, the more his leverage increases over the Democrats. And I think there's something to that argument.
Garrett, do you buy that out there? You know, we had a few Democrats today, you know, and it was from Abigail Spanberger, you know, from places. But, boy, do you sense that where are there more cracks, on the Republican side or on the Democratic side?
Look, I've heard this song before. I mean, remember, the White House was saying that things would change when Nancy Pelosi locked up the votes for speakership, that they couldn't get to a deal because Nancy Pelosi was under too much pressure from the left. Well, Nancy Pelosi's been speaker for more than a week now, and that hasn't changed the dynamic either. There were 2 votes today on the House side on bills to reopen portions of the federal government that are shut down right now. They took the old Senate bills, they voted on them in the House, and in each one of those bills, Democrats added to the number of Republicans who were crossing over to vote with them to reopen the government. That's just the math. So while I'm sure there are plenty of Democrats who are sweating this a little bit, so far they have held together more than Republicans, and I'm starting to feel like a broken record here, but the party that holds together more in these situations almost always wins, and that's been the Democrats thus far.
Susan, though, it does feel as if the political presumption is on the right, if you cave, you're with Pelosi, and on the left, if you cave, you're with Trump, we're never ending this.
Well, we may never be ending this. And by the way, just declaring a state of emergency does not reopen the government. That would continue to be a separate fight. But the trouble with talking about Republican cracks, which we've talked about for 2 years, waiting for Republicans to crack, in this fight, there's only one Republican that matters, and that is Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many House members defect on the Republican side. What matters is, will Mitch McConnell ever do anything that pressures Donald Trump to do something he doesn't want to do? And so far, the answer to that question has been no.
Can I just add, I'm looking closely at Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, who so far has been sticking with the president.
She's in leadership and up.
And she's in cycle. And when you look at the senators who have voiced their desire for the government to reopen, they tend to be the ones coming from bluish states or swing states in 2020. And as we get closer to the people who are on that kind of margin of at-risk Senate seats, Ernst is right there. If she breaks, then you're right. It's trouble for the president.
Guess what, though? Mitch McConnell's in cycle, Jason?
Yeah.
And that's a place where I'm guessing I'm not guessing, I know this, President Trump's more popular with Kentucky Republicans than Mitch McConnell.
Exactly. So he's not, unless Mitch McConnell can find a way to sell this to President Trump and make it a victory, we're not going to see these changes. But what we might see with Joni Ernst, what we might see is, in a lot of these Midwestern states, a lot of these Western states, red states, the federal government is your biggest employer, right? I mean, you're talking Montana, where the Department of the Interior Office and the federal marshal, these people are the primary employers in these states. Texas has the second largest number of federal employees. If this extends, once other agencies start to close down, you're going to see people privately say to the president or try to get it through to Mitch, look, you got to save us here. I can't explain this anymore. And he'll be responsible for explaining this to Trump.
Susan, you think we go? Let me ask you this. Is the government open by the time Michael Cohen testifies?
Yes. I would say yes, just because how could it not be?
Famous last words. Garrett Haake, go see if you can find more senators to talk to you. Feels like
I'll try.
I know, and see if we can get more of them on the record. It's always very helpful. Thank you. Panel, you guys are sticking around.